الوطن.
Good afternoon. On this Wednesday, May 28th, I'm Yumna Nofa. These are today's headlines. Syrian expatriates and legal refugees in Lebanon begin balloting at the Syrian embassy in Yerzeh, causing immense traffic. U.S. President Barack Obama says he will authorize U.S. troops to train selected Syrian rebels in order to counter the rising power of al-Qaeda-linked extremists. And voting in Egypt's presidential election is slow after polling is extended for a third day in an attempt to boost turnout, raising questions about the level of support for Sisi. Syrian expatriates and legal refugees in Lebanon begin balloting today at the Syrian embassy in Yerzeh, which has triggered a suffocating traffic congestion, jamming work-bound Lebanese citizens in their cars. Balloting began from the morning and will continue until 7 p.m. tonight. However, Syrian ambassador in Lebanon, Ali Abdelkarim Ali, says that it is likely for balloting to be prolonged a few more hours due to the huge turnout expected for the vote, or to schedule one more day for balloting. He added that the Syrian embassy will prepare the list for turnouts to be submitted to the Supreme Election Commission, authorized to announce the results. The Lebanese army deployed heavily in the area and set checkpoints for security purposes. President Bashar al-Assad is to face two challenges in Syria's June 3rd presidential election, which he is assured of winning, reports say, including Maher Abdel Hafiz Hajjar and Hassan Abdallah Nouri. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja is accusing the March 8 camp of obstructing quorum during the presidential polls and urging Speaker Nabih Berri to exert the sufficient pressure to persuade all lawmakers to attend election sessions. He adds that the Free Patriotic Movement is obstructing the elections, noting that his nomination bolsters FPM leader MP Michel Aoun's chances of being voted president. Addressing Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's recent speech, during which he states that the resistance protects the Lebanese state, Jaja says that such remarks are unacceptable and that his current existence weakens the state and creates despair among the people. The TLF chief says that he wants a president who will demonstrate his loyalty to the Lebanese people. And the next presidential election session is scheduled for June 9th. The Lebanese army arrests 14 individuals, 8 Lebanese and 6 Syrians, seizing weapons, grenades and drugs in a large bust in Sabtiye, a town in the Metin area northeast of Beirut. The army released a statement this morning saying there was a quantity of drugs, light weapons and ammunition grenades, in addition to money, military fatigues, communication devices and forged identity cards that had been confiscated during the nighttime raid. It added that the suspects were referred to the relevant authorities for further interrogation. And Syrian warplanes fired 4 air-to-surface missiles on the outskirts of Aysel, a Bekaa Valley border town known for its support for Syrian opposition fighters. Security sources state that 2 jets targeted Zamrani and Ajram near Wadi Hmayed, located at the far end of Aysel, but there have been no casualties reported as of yet. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who is expected to clinch re-election effortlessly next week, believes he saved regime from a brutal 3-year insurgency despite international isolation and calls for his departure. Assad, who is 48 years old, came to power in 2000 with the reputation of a modernist after the death of his father Hafiz, who developed the rigid military political system his son inherited. But any hopes of change have long since evaporated, with a conflict that has now killed more than 160,000 people and wrought massive destruction on the country, showing no sign of abating. Assad has declared several times that he will never let go of power, whatever the price. U.S. President Barack Obama says he will authorize U.S. troops to train selected Syrian rebels, meantime, in order to counter the rising power of al-Qaeda-linked extremists. The White House did not confirm or deny the plan, but said it was constantly considering available options to combat the terrorist threat emanating from Syria and to facilitate an end to the crisis. Officially, U.S. support for Syrian rebels has been limited to non-lethal aid, amounting to $287 US, though the CIA reportedly participated in a secret program to train moderate rebels in Jordan. Obama may announce the new U.S. position during a speech at the West Point Military Academy tonight. The president will not give details on how many rebels would be trained nor where their training would take place. But in recent weeks, Syrian rebels have reported receiving U.S.-made TOW anti-tank missiles without making clear whether the missiles were sent by Washington or by Saudi Arabia with U.S. approval. Coming up next, Hillary Clinton's book, Hard Choices, is set for release, and we've got an excerpt. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Future Television. Voting in Egypt's presidential election is slow after polling was extended for a third day in an attempt to boost turnout, raising questions about the level of support for the man forecast to win, former Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. An early tour of Cairo polling stations suggested authorities would again struggle to get more people to cast their ballots. The state media reports that the two-day vote was originally due to conclude on Tuesday, but was extended until tonight to allow the greatest number possible to vote. Now, voter turnout may have also been low because some Egyptians who decided Sisi's victory was a foregone conclusion saw no point in casting ballots. In Washington, the U.S. State Department recommended Americans in Libya depart immediately in its latest travel warning. This comes amid worsening unrest in Libya, where militia battles have plunged the country into complete chaos. Due to security concerns, the Department of State has limited staffing at Embassy Tripoli and is only able to offer very limited emergency services to U.S. citizens in Libya. This comes after gunmen attacked the home of Libya's new prime minister on Tuesday, as the growing security concerns prompted Washington to recommend Americans leave the country. Meanwhile, jihadist group Ansar al-Sharia, targeted by an ex-general, have called on Libyans to repudiate him. Tunisia's Interior Ministry says gunmen attacked the home of the country's top security official, killing 4 of the police guarding it. The statement says that the attack on Interior Minister Lafti Ben Jiddo's home in the southern city of Kasserine took place just before midnight. Kasserine in Tunisia's impoverished interior is not far from Mount Shambi, where soldiers have been battling al-Qaeda-linked extremists near the Algerian border. Ukraine says it has recaptured the airport in the eastern city of Donetsk after a day of airstrikes and fear of gun battles with pro-Moscow separatists that left at least 48 dead, including 2 civilians. Interior Ministry Arsen Avakov says the military is continuing its operation at the airport. According to Interfax Ukraine, the Ukrainian State Aviation Services has said the airport will stay closed until the evening of May 28th. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in also Europe reported that it had lost contact with a 4-member observer team based in the rest of city since Monday evening. Russian President Vladimir Putin immediately called on Ukraine to end its punitive operation in the rebel-held east and for talks between Kiev and the pro-Russian separatists. A fire at a rural South Korean hospital for chronically ill elderly patients killed 21 and injured 8 in the second major fire this week. While the country still mourns the death of more than 300 people in a ferry disaster last month. The fire started after midnight at the hospital in the southwest region of Jeolla. Fire officials state that it was put out relatively quickly, but most of the victims were elderly patients who were unable to walk or move freely, leading to the large number of casualties. Former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden says he was a trained spy. He used his job as a computer network administrator to remove tens of thousands of secret documents from an NSA facility in Hawaii, which he then leaked to the media. He has been charged with espionage and other offenses in the U.S. and could face 30 years in prison if convicted.
It's no secret that the U.S. tends to get more and better intelligence out of computers nowadays than they do out of people. I was trained as a spy in sort of the traditional sense of the word, in that I lived and worked undercover overseas, pretending to work in a job that I'm not, and even being assigned a name that was not mine. But I am a technical specialist. I am a technical expert. I don't work with people. I don't recruit agents. What I do is I put systems to work for the United States. And I've done that at all levels, from the bottom, on the ground, all the way to the top. Now, the government might deny these things. They might frame it in certain ways and say, oh, well, you know, he's a low-level analyst. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to use one position that I've had in a career here or there to distract from the totality of my experience, which is that I've worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, undercover, overseas. I've worked for the National Security Agency, undercover, overseas, and I've worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency as a lecturer at the Joint Counterintelligence Training Academy, where I developed sources and methods for keeping our information and people secure in the most hostile and dangerous environments around the world. So when they say I'm a low-level systems administrator, that I don't know what I'm talking about, I'd say it's somewhat misleading.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton released a short excerpt from her upcoming book, Hard Choices, in which she examines her decisions as Secretary of State during her 4-year stint. While admitting she would revisit certain choices, Clinton writes that she was proud of what she accomplished. Widely seen as a potential presidential candidate in 2016, Clinton urged the use of America's strength to mold the country's foreign policy and build a world with more partners and fewer adversaries. Hard Choices is set to be released on June 10th.
I worked up on the 3rd floor of our house in New York. I have this cozy little study that is in what used to be the attic of the old farmhouse we live in, and just sort of toiled away and to drag the manuscript that I was working on with me everywhere I went, including on vacation, which actually turned out to be a godsend because I had the idea about how to begin the book by starting at the end of my 2008 campaign and talking about the very unlikely journey that led me to be asked by President-elect Obama to serve as Secretary of State and then to develop a partnership and friendship with him over the 4 years we worked together. The hardest part was writing it. The hardest part was working on it. I had a great, great team that I could never have done it without. But ultimately, I had to take responsibility for every word. I had to be the one who decided how I wanted to describe a situation, how I thought it fit into my overall view about where America is in the 21st century, how to connect it with people here at home. You know, why does an economic crisis in Athens, Greece affect people living in Athens, Georgia? I approached my work with confidence in our country's enduring strengths and purpose, and humility about how much remains beyond our knowledge and control. I worked to reorient American foreign policy around what I call smart power. To succeed in the 21st century, we need to integrate the traditional tools of foreign policy, diplomacy, development assistance, and military force, while also tapping the energy and ideas of the private sector and empowering citizens, especially the activists, organizers, and problem solvers we call civil society, to meet their own challenges and shape their own futures.
On that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Syrian expatriates and legal refugees in Lebanon begin balloting at the Syrian embassy in Yerzey, causing immense traffic. U.S. President Barack Obama says he will authorize U.S. troops to train selected Syrian rebels in order to counter the rising power of al-Qaeda-linked extremists. And voting in Egypt's presidential election is slow after polling is extended for a 3rd day in an attempt to boost turnout, raising questions about the level of support for Sisi. Make sure you join Linda TV tomorrow at 4:20 for what's making headlines in Lebanon around the world. Take care.